Jeez, it's going to be a good show. Now, I'm not trying to reference Dontay Corleone in the same breath as Bruce Springsteen, but just as Bruce Springsteen is the boss of music, Dontay Corleone is the boss of the Bearcats defense. We'll explain on this episode of Locked On Bearcats.
You are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Right, here we go. Thanks so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you listen to podcasts, including on YouTube. You can watch us there, your first watch of the day. So don't forget to subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel. We're just about to 800 subscribers, so we're hoping to hit 1,000 by football season. So keep those subscribers coming. Follow us to get an alert every time that we drop a new episode. My name's Alex Frank, your host each and every day of Locked On Bearcats. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, June 13th. We are, 18 days away from the Bearcats being members of the Big 12. And today, I have the privilege of being joined by one of Pro Football Focus's esteemed members. He is a college football analyst for Pro Football Focus, and he's also the host of Preferred Walk-On. He's also a proud Newhouse alum of Syracuse University. Of course, that is where the great Dan Hort and so many others went to. He is Pro Football Focus writer Max Chadwick, who recently penned an article on the boss of the Bearcats defense, Dontay Corleone. And that is why he joins us today. Max, it is so great to have you on. First off, I want to ask you just like what's your biggest takeaway from your conversation with Dontay Corleone? What kind of vibe are you getting from him? What kind of person is he? What kind of player expectations are you expecting from him this season, Max?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, Alex, thank you so much for having me on. I'm pumped to be on here. But yeah, Dontay Corleone was one of my favorite interviews that I've done so far. And he's a little soft-spoken, but you can tell that there is a killer instinct inside of him. You can see why he was dubbed the Godfather by Cincinnati Bearcat fans. And, the big thing that I took away from that interview was how much he's just playing for his mom, honestly. I mentioned his mom early in the interview, and he lit up, and he was like, listen, man, back in high school, she was working 16 hours a day, a bunch of jobs, in a single-parent household. So every single time I go out there, I'm playing for her, and I'm trying to, make her life better, is what he was saying. So that really fired me up. And yeah, he's a phenomenal kid. And Cincinnati's got a really, really not only great player in the middle of their defensive line, but a great human being in that program as well.
So one of the things, and that was one of my biggest takeaways from that story, was how much his mom serves as his motivation. I did not realize that, Max. I thought, obviously I didn't know everything about Dontay Corleone prior to reading your story on him. But something else I took away from it is you focus on, his abilities as a run stopper. Where do you put him amongst the best run stoppers in the country heading into 2023?
Oh, man, he's got to be up there as like the best of the best. I mean, he really was. I mean, he had the highest overall grade for PFF this past season at 93.8. And he actually, because of that, really was because of his run defense grade. He had 94.7 run defense grade, which is actually the best mark that we've seen from a defensive player since Micah Parsons back in 2019. And, you look at the single season highest grades, he was fifth on that list, tied for fifth with Vita Vea. And the guys above him, Quinnen Williams, Maurice Hurst, Reuben Foster, and Micah Parsons, like I said before. Those are all like really great players in college, and then some of them are great in the NFL as well. And the others that didn't, succeed in the NFL are really for reasons outside of football. So yeah, Dontay Corleone is an amazing run defender. And the big stat that I loved looking at was that, he's a guy who didn't play that much. He wasn't on the field every single play for Cincinnati's defense, but he was still one of the best run defenders in the country. So he only played, the 256th most snaps on run defense among defensive tackles. Even though he was 256th in snaps, he had the sixth most run stops in the country among defensive tackles. So that just doesn't line up at all. That means when he was on the field and they were running the ball, it was almost always Dontay Corleone that was coming up with the stop. So yeah, he is really one of the best, if not the best, run defender in college football.
Yeah, and that's what's so amazing to me. So what you're saying is when he was on the field, he was one of the most productive players in all of college football because he had the 6th most run stops in the country. Now, let's look at the last 2 games of the Bearcats season last year, Tulane and Louisville. Max Chadwick, if Dontay Corleone is on the field for either of those games, maybe both, do you think the Bearcats win those games?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough seeing if they could actually win those games. But yeah, I mean, he definitely could. He definitely make a huge impact. And you look at that Tulane team; they relied so much on that run game last year. Tyjae Spears, and obviously Louisville with their run game with Lee Cunningham at quarterback too. So yeah, he would have definitely made an impact. I don't know if I would say they would have won those games, but yeah, it definitely would have made it a lot closer. And it could have swung it in Cincinnati's favor last year,
given how close those games were, Max. I mean, Tulane ran for over 200 yards, and yet there the Bearcats were up 24-20 with just under 6 minutes to play and a chance to make one more defensive stand and earn that spot in the American Conference Championship game against Central Florida. Ultimately, Tulane got that spot, hosted it, won, and then went on to win the Cotton Bowl. And then the Bearcats played Louisville in the Fenway Bowl, the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. Very interesting bowl game that was, and they got ran over by the Louisville Cardinals offense. The same Cardinal offense that Scott Satterfield coached last year. Now he's head coach in the Cincinnati Bearcats. But Max Chadwick, there's one key element to this team on the other side of the ball that I want to focus on with you, and we'll do that next here on Locked On Bearcats. But first, it is time for me to tell you how this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So, what do I love about betting on FanDuel? Well, they have great promotions every day. They have a safe and secure app, and I get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown right now. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Max Chadwick at Chad_Maxwick from Pro Football Focus is here with me today talking all things the boss, the godfather of the Bearcats defense. He nicknamed him the Don of the Bearcats defense, Dontay Corleone. Max, one key element of this Bearcats team heading into 2023 that I am really excited to see is the Bearcats defense switching from a 3-3-5 to a 4-2-5. How is that going to impact Dontay Corleone, and will we see more of him this season?
Yeah, I think we will. And he actually mentioned that in the interview. He was saying, yeah, I'm trying to slim down this offseason so that he could become more of a 3-down player rather than a 2-down player, which he really was for Cincinnati. And, he played well as a pass rusher when he was on the field on passing downs. But again, it's just he wasn't on the field that much. So I think not a lot of people are talking about him as one of the best defensive tackles in the country, even though when he was on the field, he played like it. I think now that he's going to be playing a lot more this season, I think he's going to become, that superstar that I think he is. And yeah, you mentioned that they're going to a 4-2-5 now. That means he probably won't be playing as much nose tackle this upcoming season, which could give him more free reign as a pass rusher. So yeah, I'm excited for him to be playing more of that traditional defensive tackle role instead of a nose tackle. So yeah, I think this change for him is going to be great. And he mentioned before how he's slimming down. He's slimming down in jersey number 2, going from number 58 to number 2. So yeah, he's kind of just slimming down in all aspects this year to become, more of a guy that Cincinnati can rely on every single play.
So you're saying that we're going to see potentially more of him this season. We're going to see more snaps. We're going to see him in more run situations. How do you think he gets better in passing situations, Max?
Honestly, he was actually like efficiency wise, he was up there with like the best of the best. I think he had like the 6th or 7th best pass rush win rate among all defensive tackles in the country. The thing is, and we were talking about it, it's just he's got to stay on the field. Like that's the big thing for him. And I think he will be able to stay on the field more this year. He played around like 350 snaps this year, which is like enough to not completely throw away his grade, but it's not as much as other guys are getting like maybe like 500, 600 snaps. So I think he's going to be a guy that, the big thing for him is just staying on the field, honestly, because I think when he's on the field, he's dominant and continuing that dominance. Obviously, when you have fresh legs, it's easier to be dominant. So, being dominant while also playing pretty much 3 downs the entire time for Cincinnati, I think that's the big key for him this year. So I think as a player, you could still obviously improve in a lot of aspects, but the big thing for him is just being able to stay on the field for all 3 downs for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely critical for this defense. That I think, as I look at it right now, Max, I think it's going to be the absolute strength of this team. This defense still has so many talented players, even after the overhaul in the transfer portal. So, let me ask you, excuse me, let me ask you this. What do you think, what are your expectations for Corleone this season? Because he's coming off of such an amazing season last year where he was a 3rd-team All-American by Pro Football Focus. What do you expect from him this season?
I expect him to be like that. Again, I actually ranked him as the number 2 returning defensive tackle in college football behind Jerzon Newton from Illinois, who I was lucky enough to be able to talk to too. And yeah, I think he's that good. And I think he could establish himself as one of the premier defensive tackles, not only in college football, but he could become like, he's not really talked about right now in the 2024 NFL draft. He could become a guy that, if he plays well enough and he stays on the field for all 3 downs, maybe he could become a day 2 pick, honestly, going against some pretty good Big 12 interior offensive linemen like Cooper Beebe, who I think is the best guard in college football at Kansas State, who I was able to talk to too. So yeah, Dontay Corleone, I think he could end up being maybe a 1st-team All-American if he continues his dominance while playing more, and maybe, one of the best defensive tackles in this upcoming draft as well.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you think he'll end up declaring for the NFL draft following this season?
That's an interesting question. I know I talked to him a little bit about it. He really was like, I'm not even thinking about the NFL right now. He's like, what I'm focusing on is becoming more of a professional. So he's like, I'm really treating this season like it's no joke. This is really like it's business now, which is good to see for Cincinnati fans. So he's treating it like a professional already. Like I said before, he's not really being talked about as a premier prospect yet. I think that will change. So as of right now, I mean, he could be playing another couple years for Cincinnati, but if he has a big time year, if he's a 1st-team All-American again, maybe he could say, hey man, I'm going to be maybe even a 1st-round pick, maybe a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Maybe it's time for me to go. So I don't quite know what his plans will be, because he really was not thinking about the NFL at all. But yeah, I mean, if he has a great year, I mean, I'm sure Cincinnati fans would trade in him leaving after the season if it means that he has an unbelievable year again.
Wow, how about that? Maybe playing 2 more seasons with Cincinnati. As far as the Big 12, do you think he has the potential to be 1st-team All Big 12? I mean, if he was an All-American last year, you think he'd have to be 1st-team All Big 12, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, like in the conference, Max. 1st season for the Bearcats in the Big 12. Can he rack up some big-time conference awards and then take it to a national level at the College Football Awards? Do you think he's going to have a heavy trophy case this season?
He could. He very well could. Like I said before, I do think he's one of the top 2 to 3 defensive tackles in college football. So I really do think he could end up becoming the best defensive tackle that we could say at the end of the year. Now, obviously, it's a jump in competition level. I mentioned before, you're going up against some really good interior offensive linemen in the Big 12 and some really good tackles as well. And I mentioned before Cooper Beebe, who I consider to be the best interior offensive lineman in college football. So that's a battle that I personally cannot wait for. So yeah, I really think he could end up becoming one of the best, not only defensive tackles in the Big 12, not only in the country, but one of the best defensive players in the country as well. The big thing, like I said, is just continuing to be as dominant as he was last year, while playing a lot more snaps as well. That's the big thing for him. And I think if he slims down and if he, continues that way, I think he could definitely become, one of the best defensive players in college football and maybe take home a couple trophies as well.
Be great to see. All right, so the Bearcats defense, I mentioned them overall in this segment. So we're going to talk about how they will fare this season overall, and an updated season outlook on the Bearcats as they prepare for their first season in the Big 12. We do that next here on Locked On Bearcats. Max Chadwick, college football writer at Pro Football Focus at Chad_Maxwick, joining me today to discuss the recent piece he wrote on the boss, the Don, the godfather of the Bearcats defense, Dontay Corleone. You can check that out at Pro Football Focus. Max, the Bearcats defense, it's been this team's strength over the last 5-6 seasons. Even though Luke Fickell's gone in is Scott Satterfield, offensive-minded head coach, do you think, Max Chadwick, that the Bearcats defense can be just as good this season, and why?
I think they can. The big thing, obviously, like I said before, they're going up in competition level, and obviously the offensive talent in the Big 12 has always been fantastic. You look at Texas, they're one of the best offensive teams, I think, in the country heading into next season. But yeah, I think they definitely can. And losing Luke Fickell is going to hurt them. But I do love the hire of Brian Brown as the new defensive coordinator. He was a phenomenal defensive coordinator last year at Louisville. They had one of the most efficient defenses in college football. Corleone, actually, when I talked to him about him, he lit up about Brian Brown too. He's like, yeah, this guy is, one of the smartest guys I've ever been around. He puts us in a position to succeed. So yeah, I think that this defense, obviously going up in competition level, I don't know if they'll put up the best as good numbers as they did in the American Athletic Conference, only because they're playing premier offenses in college football. But yeah, I think they could still, hang tough with a lot of really good offenses in the Big 12 just because Brian Brown, you got Dontay Corleone there as well. So yeah, I think this is a defense that definitely could hang around.
It's one thing I always go back to. It's not just about can you slow down the Big 12 passing games. It's if you can slow down the running games. And having Dontay Corleone is going to allow you to do that. Now, one thing you talked about in your piece, in addition to Dontay Corleone, is the surprise that Ivan Pace Jr. went undrafted. Well, this year, the Bearcats still have his younger brother, Deshaun Pace. What are your expectations for him? Do you see him declaring for the NFL draft following this season?
Yeah, he definitely could. And, he's a guy that actually has a little bit more size than his older brother, Ivan, which is, I think, ultimately the reason why Ivan wasn't drafted. So Deshaun, 6'2", 215, still got to add some weight for sure. But in terms of length, which is what I think killed Ivan in the draft process, I think that he's got all that. So I don't know if he's quite as good as Ivan. I think he had kind of a down year compared to what he did in 2021. But I still think he's one of the best linebackers in the Big 12 heading into next season. So yeah, I think he's a guy that, I really like his tape in 2021. Like I said, I want to see him bounce back a little bit. But yeah, I think he's a guy that, does everything well. He's a good run defender. He's a good pass rusher. He's good in coverage as well. So yeah, I think Deshaun Pace could definitely take over that role of, him and Corleone could be the two leaders of that Bearcat defense.
Who's someone on the defense that we're not talking about that you could see making a huge impact this season?
That's an interesting question. I like some of the transfers they brought in. Obviously, the secondary is going to be pretty transfer heavy with Jordan Young and DJ Taylor coming in, probably starting on that defense. I like Jawan Briggs a little bit as well too. Malik Van is another guy I like a lot. So yeah, there's some underrated players. They got the stars like Dontay Corleone and like Deshaun Pace, but there are some underrated players that like the Malik Vans of the world, like Jawan Briggs as well. I think those are the guys that I'm at least keeping an eye on this year.
Tell you what, when you mentioned the name Jawan Briggs, I just think about that whole defensive line. You mentioned Malik Van, how great of a defensive line that is. Where do you put that defensive line amongst the best in the Big 12 in college football, Max?
Oh, it's got to be up there. Those are like I said, those are all guys that I really like. And, there are some really amazing defensive lines in college football right now. Like Penn State, I know has a phenomenal, especially edge rotation at Penn State right now. But yeah, Cincinnati definitely should be up there. Later in the summer, I'm going to really dive into it and probably rank every position group in college football. And I wouldn't be surprised if Cincinnati has one of the top 5 to 10 defensive lines on my list when it's all said and done.
FanDuel right now has the Bearcats over-under projections at 5.5 wins. Do you see them going over or under that?
So I got asked this question a couple times. I do think they'll go over. I don't know if you should expect, like Cincinnati, I think in the last 5 years, if I could be mistaken, has gone 9 wins or more. Like I said before,
correct.
It's going up in competition level. So I think a 6-6 season should be expected, especially losing Luke Fickell, losing some other guys, some really important pieces on that team. A lot of transfers. will be playing a lot this year for the Bearcats. I think especially at the wide receiver position, you see Donovan Ollie, D. Wiggins. Those are probably 2 of the 3 starting receivers. They're both transferring in. So going to be a new look offense, obviously a new quarterback too, and Emory Jones coming in as well. So yeah, I think 6-6 is what what I'm expecting, at least for Cincinnati. Anything more than 6-6 should be looked at as a resounding success. Anything less than 6-6 should be looked at as a disappointment. So I'm looking at 6-6 as kind of like that barometer. So I at least expect Cincinnati to make a bowl game in their first year in the Big 12.
Excuse me, my mic was muted there. Max Chadwick, sorry for those of you listening, my mic was muted there. I thought I had it unmuted, but Max Chadwick at Pro Football Focus very confident in the Cincinnati Bearcats. Now, Max, you told me that you've lived in Cincinnati since October, but you haven't tried Skyline Chili. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I am. I don't know why I'm so scared to try it. I don't know about the chili on spaghetti or anything like that. I know there's more than just a chili on spaghetti.
Good.
So I'm going to have to try it eventually. I'm not the biggest chili fan in the world, but yeah, I have to do it. I have to at some point before I move out of Cincinnati. I have to at least get it once. So yeah, haven't done it yet in my, I think 8 months that I've been to Cincinnati so far. But yeah, I'm gonna have to do it before I leave.
Oh yeah. Have you had Montgomery Inn?
No, I haven't. I've heard a lot about that, and I haven't actually gotten it yet. There's a lot of restaurants that I haven't tried yet. I've kind of just been going downtown, but there's a lot of restaurants. So if you have any recommendations, I'd very much take them.
Okay. Well, Skyline Montgomery Inn, my first 2. La Rosa's Pizza. That's always very good. Holy Grail at the Banks, Yard House, Moore Lane Locker House, Jeff Ruby's. He's got multiple restaurants. Let's see. Oh, there's plenty of others. I mean, and you can go. It's not just downtown. You got Rookwood. You got Kenwood. I mean, you got all these great suburbs. Hyde Park in Cincinnati. And then, have you at least had Grader's ice cream, Max?
No, because all right, I haven't had Grader's yet. I have actually no, I think I have once, but there's this ice cream place literally right next to my apartment building called Hello Honey, which is incredibly dangerous because I go there too much. But yeah, Hello Honey is literally right next to me, and that's a place that I really do enjoy.
All right, fair enough. So Max is still getting adapted into Cincinnati. He's still getting acquainted with the Bearcats and Joe Burrow and Ellie De La Cruz and FC Cincinnati. So Max Chadwick at Pro Football Focus at Chad_Maxwick on Twitter. He's a Newhouse alum, the SI Newhouse School of Broadcasting at Syracuse University, which the great Dan Horde is an alum of as well. And so many great broadcasters and writers a part of that alumni network. Max, thank you so much for your time, man. Best wishes to you, and we'll cross paths soon, okay?
Thanks so much, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Max Chadwick at Pro Football Focus. You can follow him let me change the format here. You can follow him at Chad_Maxwick on Twitter. And you can follow me on Twitter at Frankie_Nice. Sorry, as I adjust the screen, let me put up my Twitter overlay. There we go. I'm on Twitter at Frankie_90 with 2 N's and an ATI. And of course, Instagram, AlexFrank_, email alex3frank@gmail.com. So much to get to this week. We will be here on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So looking forward to being here with you and all the great people here on Locked On Bearcats and the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. 18 days away from being members of the Big 12. How sweet it is. I'm Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'm back tomorrow here on Locked On Bearcats.